Good morning, siblings in Christ. So, I actually have a couple of different words that I want to release to you guys today. I'm going to do them in two separate videos because they are two totally different words. One is based off of a vision that God gave me, and then the other is based off of a dream that I had last night, a piece of a dream that I had. So, the one that I'm going to talk about right now is the one based off of the dream that I had last night. So, there were many parts to this dream, but this part was highlighted particularly to me. So in this part, I was in a church. This is a church that I had never seen before. This wasn't my church. I don't know what church this was. It was really big. I was kind of sitting towards the back. And then there were some family members on the sides of me. And in front of me, there was a girl. Now, let me explain this girl to you guys first off. So this I shouldn't say girl, woman. There was a woman in front of me who, this is a person that is in my hometown. I went to school with this girl. I actually used to, this girl sells hair as well, like weave, like bundles and stuff. And so I actually have bought some bundles from her before. Um, this was before I knew anything about who she is or what she does. So I bought some bundles of a weave before from her. What else? So about maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, we actually went to the same gym. I saw her one time, and she walked past me like she just couldn't, like, me and her have never had words or anything like that. The only encounter I've ever had was buying the weave from her and from high school, right? But we never talked in high school. She was a year older than me. And in the gym, I looked at her when she passed me by and I thought, should I speak to this girl? Like, she probably knows my face. Should I speak to her? Which I was going to. But she literally walked right past me like I didn't exist. Like she didn't even look at me, right? So this girl, in real life, she calls herself, I don't want to call her a spiritualist, because spiritualists, I feel like they do like the medium type stuff, like speaking to the dead and stuff like that. She doesn't do that. She calls herself basically a prophetess from God. Basically, that God gives her visions and predicts future for people and tells them, like, she reads their palms and she does things with crystals and stuff like that, right? But she calls herself somebody from God that God sent to speak to the world. That's what she says, who she is. Okay, so I haven't seen this girl since that gym thing, which was about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. And again, I never spoke to her other than buying the hair from her. So in my dream last night, she was in front of me in the church. She was maybe, so the way that the pews looked in this church, they were not all on the same level. It kind of went up like how it is in the mega churches. That's what it kind of looked like. So there was like levels to the pews, how they were seated. And she was down a few from me, but she was like, God had like honed me in on her. Like I could see her up close, although she was down a little further. And she was doing something like this with her hands up in the air, and she was speaking while the pastor was down there speaking and preaching too. She was turned towards me, as a matter of fact. She wasn't even turned towards the preacher. I was seated and I was looking down at the stage or the pulpit, and she was turned the opposite way, looking like toward my way. She wasn't looking at me, but she was turned toward me. And she was doing something like this with her hands in the air, and she was speaking and saying things like she was literally casting spells or doing magic while we were right there in church. And then that was the end of that part of the dream. Now, obviously, if there are, not even if, when, because this is a way bigger subject that I could even touch in this small video. When there are witches in church, they do not act like that. I will say that. I have encountered a witch in church myself. They do not act like that. They know the Bible better than we do, just as the devil does. And they don't act out of the ordinary. They're not casting spells. They're not doing weird things to let you know that they are witches, right? So I know what witchcraft is myself. But I went online and I said, let me see online what their actual definition of witchcraft is. Because when we think witchcraft, a lot of people who don't know about witchcraft and spell work, they think putting things in like a little cauldron, the green face and the bump on the nose and looking like a witch and casting spells and like with a wand. And that is not how modern day witchcraft is. I'm not saying some witches probably still don't do that. Maybe they do. I don't know. But that is not what it looks like in this day and age. That is not the witches that are sitting next to you in church. The witches that are in school with you or at work with you. That is not what they do, right? And it's so funny because when I looked up the actual definition of witchcraft, anytime you look up anything now, like online, this is how you know, like the internet and stuff is just so devilish, because it always shows a definition in favor of the world. It never really shows a biblical view. If you want a biblical view of anything, you have to specifically type in biblical, because everything else is to the world's favor. Okay. So witchcraft as described on the internet is the practice of magical skills, rituals, and abilities used to influence people or events. Now, anything that has to do with influencing somebody, you know that that's witchcraft, because guess what? God gave us a free will. And at any point, if anybody is taking away your free will, that is not of God, that is of the devil. It often involves nature, intention, and personal energy. Now, this is the part right here that got me on. Some forms of witchcraft, because we know that there are many forms, right, emphasize working with natural energies, seasons, and elements. And people that know God, how does God move? He moves in seasons, right? That's one thing about Satan. He's always trying to copy God, and that's why you have to stay vigilant and use your discernment, because it will look a lot like God sometimes, and it will be straight from the devil. Okay? It's highly individualistic, often focusing on personal empowerment. And again, anything that has to do with self, anything that has to do with yourself being empowered or yourself elevating or that type of stuff, that egotistical, arrogant type of stuff is of the devil. It is not of God. We are here to serve, not be served. We are here to worship, not be worshiped. It is not about us at all. We are but vessels to the Most High, right? We are not here to serve ourselves or worry about what can I get from this. There are plenty of verses in the Bible that talk about witchcraft and how witches were dealt with back then in biblical times. Obviously, they're not going to be hung or stoned or burned now because we don't do that type of stuff. But it still just emphasizes the way that God looks at sorcerers and spiritualists. There is Exodus 22:18, Deuteronomy 18:10, 1 Samuel 15, Galatians 5:19, Leviticus, Revelation, many other verses in the Bible, many different places in the Bible. It talks about divination and sorcery and spell work, right? But there is a book. This is a book that I'm actually getting it for my grandmother because she's wanted it for a really long time. It's called Witchcraft in the Pews, and it's wrote by Bishop George Bloomer. It talks about all the ways that there are witchcraft in the church. And again, witchcraft does not look like, or is not what you think it may look like. Because again, it's not a witch waving her wand or putting things in a cauldron these days. It talks about, his book talks about like how individuals can use manipulation and fear tactics on their congregation, and how they can try to break up families or even get the whole family like together just to manipulate them and cause fear, and how they can use the media to manipulate things too in churches. But it is a book that I feel like everybody should read in terms of being in a church, especially if this is not, I'm not even going to say a new church that you go to, because it could have been happening in the church that you're in all along and you just never knew. I had a dream like a long time ago, not a long time ago, but I actually posted a word about it. There was, in my dream, there was women trying to get me to eat something that was very disgusting, and they tried to mask it with these marshmallows, right? And the woman that gave it to me looked like a woman that was in my church. Looked almost exactly like her, and I hadn't seen her in a while. But the subconscious can do that to you too. But this was a dream that God had given me. Why would he have showed me this woman? You know, but then again, sometimes, again, context is very important, because God does place different people in your dreams that it's not necessarily about that actual person, but he's just showing you the gist of what's happening, right? But in the dream last night, it was this girl who is a known witch or spiritualist or whatever you want to call her in my community. She was working a spell while she was right there in the church. And it was just like, I was just looking at her like, she's not even trying to hide it. She wasn't even trying to hide it. She was just like in front of everybody doing this weird waving her arm stuff and just talking, like speaking as if she was doing something good in church, right? And I want to say this too, because I said that she had sold me some bundles of hair, right? Some human hair, like, you know, we get bundles from girls. I know men don't really know a lot about this stuff, but she sold me some bundles of hair before. This was before she started reading people's palms and all that. This was years before. And she had sold me that hair, and it just reminded me, you have to be careful who you buy things from. When you are buying things from people, be careful. Pray over the things that you have. And this was a huge topic like not too long ago too, about praying over the weave, especially when it's human hair that you buy from people, because that hair could have come off a woman who was a witch, or somebody from, most of the time it is like Indian hair from different like countries and stuff like that, because that's where they just get the hair from. So different cultures practice different things. You don't know what type of spirit is tied to that hair that you are buying. So always pray over the hair that you buy, especially if it is human hair, because it's coming from a real person who has a spirit. Spirits attach themselves to things. So yeah, just ladies, pray for the hair that you buy. And again, I wasn't aware if she was doing those things back then. This was years, many years ago. But still, it just reminded me like to pray for that stuff. And a lot of the times in the church, I feel like people go so hard on especially mega church pastors, and they go, oh, they just want money, you know, they're driving better and living better than us. And but a lot of the times it's not even about the money, it's about power. And that is a form of witchcraft too. Anything that has to do with influencing someone else's will, that is a form of witchcraft. But that's all I'm gonna say about that. Again, this is a major topic, and there could be way more said that I could even fit in this video. But this is just a reminder to someone: be very careful about the people in your church too, especially if you are a person who has strong discernment and you feel like something is off with somebody in your church. Go with that feeling. Like, always go with that feeling. Do your due diligence on people too. It's sad that you even have to do that these days, but it's very necessary and very true. Do your due diligence on people, because there are witches sitting right next to you in the church. That is it for this video. I hope you guys found it resourceful. If you have not hit that like button, please do so now, and subscribe if you have not already. I got the juice and the sauce for y'all as always.